Hello and welcome people to another Gooner Souls video. Whether you're watching on Periscope, Twitch or YouTube, thank you very much for supporting. Let's just have a discussion. Let's have a debate. Let's talk Arsenal. This is what this show is all about. Let's see if the panic, if the anger, if the meltdown in the fan base is justified, or are we going over the top? Is Arteta the problem of Arsenal Football Club? Is this salvageable, and is he the man to take us forward, or is he the man who can turn this around? We'll have all these discussions. If you're new, do hit a like, subscribe, and do share with people, as it is very much appreciated. But we will get into these discussions very, very soon. But thank you for coming, guys. And obviously subscribe or like on whatever platform, or follow if you're on Twitter and on Twitch. So, people, what's going on at Arsenal Football Club? There is a complete meltdown within the fan base. Arteta out is a lot louder than the Arteta ins right now. There is that divide. It's got a very Emery feeling to this, where it feels like the international break has just loomed over us at the wrong time when we need to turn this around. Obviously, coming back from the international breaks, we've got Norwich, Burnley, Wimbledon in the Carabao Cup, and then Tottenham, followed by Brighton, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and then Leicester in the October fixtures. This is the run that Arteta can salvage this in, or is it the man that's wrong for the job? This is the discussion I want to have with you people, because we can react to the game, but there's not really much to talk about. It's a lot negative than positives, really. There's a lot going wrong at the club than there is right. Is the recruitment right? Has Edu done his job to allow Arteta to succeed this season, or has he set him up to fail? This is the sort of discussions we should be having. And is it all down to Arteta? Is it Edu? Or is it the Cronkies? Who's to blame for the meltdown? Who's to blame for the horrendous start of this season? This is what I want to find out from you guys. So if you do have an opinion, even if it's a strong opinion, do let me know in the chat box. I would love to interact with you guys and just find out what you guys are feeling as well. But let's just talk about how this season has prevailed. We obviously started off on 13th of August on a Friday to open up the Premier League campaign against Brentford. And we know how that went. We lost 2-0. Of course, there's circumstances, there's context to everything that happened in terms of Lacazette and Aubameyang being out. Partey, obviously, we knew the situation there, and we got beat 2-0. Now, a lot of people obviously had a lot of excuses lined up, for keeping Arteta at the helm and giving him an opportunity. It's the first game of the season. Maybe he turns it around. Maybe he needs more time to be able to be prepared for the season, which is fine. We then go into Chelsea, where a lot of his inexperience and novice comes out, and we start to see why he's the wrong man for the job, and not man-marking Reece James when he was a constant threat and they were going down our left-hand side every single time they wanted to produce an attack. And for us to not identify that, or for Arteta not to be screaming and shouting at someone to just man-mark Reece James rather than having all four defenders around Lukaku, and he still scores anyway. So is that naivety? Is that arrogance? Or is it the fact that players are no longer interested in what Arteta has to say? This is obviously what we need to be talking about. Has he lost the dressing room? Not in the traditional sense, not in the sense that he's lost it and no one respects him, but do they listen to him? Do they understand what's required of them? Because it doesn't seem like they're all on the same wavelength. It seems like they're all playing their own game. And against Chelsea, that seemed to be a bit more prominent than anything else that we had to see. And then we move on to, obviously, the West Brom game. Let's talk about it. They fielded basically an under-23 a lineup where there wasn't really a lot that could go wrong or right in that. And we obviously beat them 6-0. There's not really a lot to look into. We played good football. We attacked them well. We pressed them well. But they didn't really have a lot to offer. So there's not really a lot that you can talk about and say, you know what, that was a hard-fought victory, and we absolutely battered them because there was nothing to the game. Then we move into Man City. This was embarrassing. And yes, this is the champions of England. Yes, we were always meant to lose. I understand all of that. I get we weren't ever meant to beat City, and the chances to beat Chelsea were very slim. I understand that. I really do. But to be beat 5-0 and just to not try, that's embarrassing. I understand there's 6 to 8 players missing from the starting 11 and them being quite integral to the way we play in terms of Thomas Partey, Ben White, Gabriel. We're all missing. And who else was missing? And yeah, they were the key players missing, really. And obviously, Aubameyang coming back, and obviously we'll see if he can start firing again in the main games rather than just West Brom. They are the questions that obviously people have to answer. But let's get into it firstly. We are very, very underprepared for what is going on. And that is ultimately what's keeping us out of this talk. And, let's get into the first topic of discussion, which will be, are we prepared for this season? Are we prepared? No. Has the transfer policy and the transfer signings that we made any good? No. Has Edu done his job to allow the success of Arsenal Football Club to happen this year? No. So is it on Arteta to get the best out of these players when in reality he hasn't been given the tools to do the job? Yes. And the thing is, Edu hasn't truly done the job right, in my opinion. I'm not saying there isn't a policy. I'm not saying there isn't a thought process or there isn't an idea of what they want to do. They signed young, they signed potential, and they signed for the future. Is that the right thing to do when our starting 11 isn't anywhere near the level it needs to be at? I think that was the wrong strategy to go with. I think Edu needed to go with a strategy which was for the now. We spent £130 million on transfers and haven't looked any better. We haven't, No one can categorically tell me that we now look a lot better than we did last season and that actually we've given ourselves the best foundations to go and succeed, because we haven't. And that's just the facts of the matter. What could we have done with £130 million that would have improved us? Firstly, we could have gone and signed Awar, Basuma. Tavares is the only one which I totally understand signing, because you either go old or you go young for your backup signings or backup to your first team members anyway. Someone who's like 24, 25 established is not going to come in and be backup to Tierney. Yes, that's the competition we need, but it's not going to happen when they know they're coming in to be the backup to a Kieran Tierney. Whereas with a Tavares doesn't mind doing that because he knows he's young, he knows he's raw, and there's a lot for him to actually build on. So he didn't mind coming in there. And then when you look at Lokonga, is this the signing we needed this season, or was it more of a signing that we could have done later on? We should have brought in the likes of Basuma and Awar to categorically improve this first team, not on the hopes, not on the potential to increase. It should have been for the here and now, and that's where Edu messed up. And that is where I will blame Edu, because I don't believe he did the right things in the window. And is it on Arteta? Because let's not forget, he has been promoted. He's no longer just the head coach, he's now the manager. So he does have a say, and he has to sign off on these transfers. So can we really sit there and say it's all on Edu when Arteta does have a say now, especially with the promotion he got given early into last season from head coach to manager? I just don't think they prepared themselves in the best way they could, but they prepared themselves if Arteta didn't work out. That's what it seems to me. And I feel like in the back of their minds, they already knew that Arteta would be a big risk and he'd be a big, and it may be a problem moving forward with him. And that's what it seems to me. I don't think they prepared with Arteta. I don't think they trust him as much as they let on to do, because otherwise they would give him the players to succeed today rather than tomorrow. And let's not forget, Basuma's about 22, 23. Awar is 22, 23. The players that we're asking for, even if you get him a Max Aarons, for example, he's about 21, 22. These players are young. They've still got potential. They can still grow into amazing talents, world-class talents. But we decided to go the complete other way, where we brought in youngsters who are 22, 23 that aren't established. We decided to go down that route, which for me is the wrong direction to go down, because you can still get that same age profile, but have people who have been playing week in, week out, who have immense talent. But then it also makes me question the transfer policy, because why would you go for Aouar for 50 million all last season, all last window, waste your time to the deadline day to go for Partey or Aouar for around 45 to 50 million, and you're willing to commit that? But now that he's worth half the amount because Lyon are in financial difficulties and they really desperately need to get rid of these players just to be able to rebuild their financial structure, how come after all of that, we're not willing to sign him for half the price? I understand the attitude issues. I understand that maybe his head's not in it, or maybe he's a problem child. But the problem is, how come that wasn't the case last season? What's flipped on its head in one season to make you realize that? It makes me think that you've not done your due diligence, that you're just willing to buy players to please the fan base rather than doing your own research and doing your own proper background checks on the player to see whether he's going to be a problem. But also, some players are going to have an ego, and they're the ones with the best talent. They are the big players in the game of football. I'm not saying all of them have egos, but they do back themselves. They are going to cause a few problems. That's just the nature of football and the way it's going. There's a lot more player power, and if you can't manage that, if you can't manage that, then Arteta, are you right for this job, or do you need to go elsewhere? Implement your ideas and understand how you become a man manager to be able to move forward. Obviously, we've got Yo-Yo here. Thank you for tuning in. Obviously, do subscribe, like if you are new. Arteta, Edu don't see eye to eye regarding ins and outs. Remember reports where Arteta prioritised Aouar, Edu prioritised Partey. And this is a good point, because last season Arteta was screaming for a number 10 because he knew he didn't have a creative outlet. He didn't have that creative midfielder he wanted to bring in. And instead they signed Partey. Is that a cop-out? Was that because he was the easier player to get done and they needed to make a signing happen? I do believe that to an extent, because they knew Partey would have cost 45 million. And you've already spoken to the player, they've spoken to his family, and they've spoken to his agent, and they all aligned that he will be willing to join Arsenal. And the signing was easier to get done because all you do is submit a 45 million euro bid or transfer, and that buys out the contract, and you pay that directly to La Liga, and that brings him in. Whereas with Aouar was a bit more difficult to get done because you had to then look at, 50. Firstly, Lyon were dealing with 50 million. His agent is notorious for being difficult to deal with. And obviously, the president of Lyon is never easy. Even when we did the Lacazette signing, we were hesitant on doing it because we know how difficult they can be to deal with. So I think Edu did cop out and do the easier signing, which was Partey, just to get a player in. So I do agree with that notion. And I actually said this at the time. Arteta wanted a creative midfielder more than he needed a box-to-box or more deep lying. And we went with the opposite direction, which isn't a problem because I felt like we needed both anyways. So to get one done, but I feel like the number 10 needed to come in more than a Partey did. But then we'd lose out on a player like Partey more than we'd lose out on a player like Aouar because the eyes aren't on him as much as they are on Partey. And I feel like a Partey solves a lot more problems for a lot more clubs, like your Man United, like your Chelsea's, like your Liverpool's, for example, and like your City's as well. So it would become a lot more competitive moving forward to get that signing done. But that's where, I think the tension grew, and I feel like they don't get on because we don't really ever see them together a lot. We don't see them together, wanting to go out together or any of that to say that they're aligned in their vision and in the way they want to move forward. There always seems to be a conflict in the way that Arsenal move forward and in the signings that they're looking to do. Arteta describes certain profiles, and it seems like Edu's bringing in a different profile of player. But then also this comes down to the fact that we have an inexperienced owner, not in a business sense, because I feel like the Cronkies do good business in terms of their profit margins, in terms of how they run their clubs. They aren't bad, but it's just a way that it's just more financial runnings more than it is the success factors of their clubs and of their sporting enterprises. And that's where I talk about their novice and how novice they are and how inexperienced they are in running a football enterprise. Then you look at the CEO of the club. Is Vinay. Vinay isn't a CEO. He hasn't got experience being a CEO of a football club, but instead he's a brand guy. He's a sponsorship guy. So why is he in charge of the operations and the running of the club on a day-to-day basis? Then you look at Edu, who's the technical director or the director of football, however you want to perceive the titles. And you see the fact that he doesn't really have experience. I think the only other experience he's got, I mean, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, is from the Brazilian national team. So that's not really going to help us. Yes, his South American connections are brilliant. They might be. He might have a ton of connections. He might be able to get a lot of players from that side. But he doesn't have the European market, so you're already setting yourselves up to fail because you've basically taken a biggest proportion of the market out of the equation because he doesn't know how to deal with it. And then you look at the manager; he's also a novice, no experience. He was number 2 to Pep at Man City, and that's the only experience or the closest experience he has to being a manager. Yes, he's a captain. Yes, he was a leader as a player. I don't deny that, but being a manager is totally different to being a captain in the dressing room. So I don't know whether all of these guys align, and I feel like there's too many individuals who have different ideas on how they want to move forward. Saw a clip where Ornstein's commented on how unique Arsenal are among Prem clubs by relying on individuals when working on transfers and have maybe suffered for it. Could you expand what you mean by the individuals? Do you mean just like, as in they rely on Edu, or do they rely on certain agents? Like, is that because I don't know if I've seen this clip or not, but yeah, no, I'll definitely comment on that. But I just want to know, what do you mean by the individual, or what did he mean? Sorry, by the individuals that we talk about. But obviously we've talking about like the transfers and stuff like that, and whether we feel like Arteta's been set up in the best way to move forward as a club. And I don't think he has. I think, and also a question that I'll ask you guys, obviously, for everyone that's tuning in, thank you very much for tuning in, obviously. I do massively, massively appreciate it. But I'd like to hear, what do you guys want to see? How do you think Arsenal can move forward? And do you think the transfer business is done? Because don't forget, the window does shut on Tuesday, so they've got 2 days to firstly get the outgoings, which look to be Nketiah, which look to be Lacazette. Seems to be a player that may move on. We don't really know. So, it'd be an interesting one to see whether any of that happens. But for me, it's like, I'm looking at it in so many different ways. I'm looking at it in so many different ways that I don't know. And I'm losing a bit of hope because I did think maybe one more signing is incoming. I don't believe they'll stop the transfers here. But it's making me a lot more doubtful the days go on because we're not linked to anyone. But also, there is a bit of news on the Spurs side of things, which I do want to hit on. So obviously, guys, do hit the subscribe button. Do like if you're new. And let's talk about what Spurs are doing. So, the big news in the morning from the Spurs in the nose, and yes, they're not the most reliable. Yes, there isn't a tier 1 journalist who's reporting this, but there are rumors spreading that Spurs are looking to sign Basuma and Aouar come the end of this window. They are looking to get at least one of these players in by the time the window ends. And this is what's annoying a lot of Arsenal fans, because if they get one of them, and we've been after them all summer, this would be the final nail in the coffin for me. This would show me that Edu and Arteta are incompetent and that they can't get these deals done. This is what's annoying a lot of us. This is what's put me down since the morning, because it's like, I want Aouar, I want Basuma. They're the ones who improved the starting 11 tenfold. That gives you hope that, top 6, top 4 isn't a pipe dream, but actually a reality. These are the 2 players who really give you that. Not just signing-wise, but but the way that you can tactically change your games, the way that you can transition in and out of play, and there's so much that they can do and the fluidity they can bring into the team. Obviously, Stuart here with a comment saying he thinks there's going to be one more, definitely, hopefully more out. Spurs missed out on Conte, but did well in getting a tech director, whatever his name was. I can't pronounce. Is it Pratisi? Something like that. Yeah, they done well with that because he seems to be getting the right types of players, and they know the centre backs were a problem, and they brought Christian Romero in. Like, look, obviously we don't know enough about Romero to say whether he's going to be absolutely amazing or whether he's going to come in and hit the ground running, but they're identifying the right types of players and bringing in the right types of players. Now, obviously, with the fact that now Harry Kane is going to stay, do they have the money or the financial resources to be able to bring these players in? That's the only thing that's giving me a little bit of hope that they won't get Aouar and they won't get Basuma in, because they may not have the financial resources to be able to do that. And that's the only thing, really. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's anything else that gives me hope that they can bring people in. But if they do, that's an opportunity missed by Arsenal, a massive opportunity. Leon set the precedent from day one. It's 25 million or walk away. We're not negotiating. We want 25 million euros for Aouar, and you can have the player. And we've decided not to go for that because we want to take, well, from a lot of people's perspective, we want to take we want to pay 20 million, and we don't want to really go in at the first price they've set, which is fine if it works out. Or we want to go with this new sort of strategy of a loan with an obligation or a loan with an option to buy and bring in another midfielder in, if that is the case. But I don't see us doing two signings. It's far too late in the window to negotiate with Brighton and to negotiate with Lyon and get these signings over the line if nothing happens tomorrow. And that's the worry, because we're really, really, well, we're literally at the end of the window. And if Spurs go and do this, it's going to be a dagger to a lot of Gunners and Gunnerettes around the world. It's going to be a dagger to the heart, because these are the two players we all are screaming for. We're all crying for, because they changed the trajectory of this team. They changed the ceiling of this team. They truly make us a top four contender. And that sounds crazy, but Aouar can play on the left. You can play in an 8. Basuma can be a lone DM, and you can change into a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, and he's the perfect player to accompany Partey to be able to unleash him. Aouar can play multiple positions in a double pivot, in a number 10, and on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of an attack as well. He's versatile. He allows you to do so much more than just being able to play this static 4-2-3-1, but he allows you to transition well. He's a fluid player with bags of potential. He's only 22, and so is Basuma. He can play lone DM in the pivot, and he allows you to make your midfield a lot more fluid and be a general, and that's what we're missing. He's a definite upgrade on Xhaka. He's more mobile. He has the athleticism to be able to be press resistant, which is one thing Xhaka can't do. So for me, it just makes a lot of sense. But it's Arsenal Football Club. When have we ever made sense? But let's move on to talking about Arteta and my feelings towards him. Have they changed, or are we in the same situation where we want him in or whether we want him out? So over the last few days, especially, and leading, let's say the last sort of couple of weeks, the atmosphere, the vibe of Arsenal fans has changed. People are now losing a lot more faith in Arteta than there are people who are Arteta in. There are people out there who want to give Arteta time. They want to give him his starting 11. They want the players to come back in before they make a true judgment. But this is Arsenal Football Club. We are notorious for injuries. We are notorious for having players out when we need them most. And that is part of the challenge at Arsenal, is to overcome that. Am I being harsh when I say that the performances have been unacceptable? I understand there are players out. I understand the starting 11 members who are missing. You know, Pepe's been out against Man City. You know, he's had Partey out. He's had Tierney out last season. He's He's had multiple injuries and COVID situations to deal with. But does this give him a free pass to not have the team performing? For me, it doesn't. An effort, is number one. The team to work hard is just a given. For them to not really want to play your style or your system or not give 100% for you is just the first step of losing that dressing room. I'm not saying he's lost it yet, but it's getting to that point. It is truly getting to a point where maybe this job and the players will turn on him. We've seen the Aubameyang press conference and he said this isn't good enough and things need to be talked about, and he wasn't looking positive. You can see the expression on Aubameyang's face if you're going to win a game or if we're going to lose. He has a smug, swagger look on his face when we win. But when he's in doubt about the tactics, you can see it on his face. And his face gives away exactly how the result may play out. And that's what I look for now. I look at Aubameyang and see, okay, is he confident? Because if he is, at West Brom, he knew who we're going to beat. So that's why he had that smug, swagger look on his face. Whereas with against Man City, against Chelsea, sorry, he didn't even play, did he? But, he didn't have that. He didn't look confident. He didn't look like he had that swagger about him. And obviously, we know what the results were like. It wasn't great. So, and then when you combine all of that with the fact that he's never won a game coming out of the first half losing, that's not a good start. That means you can't change the mentality. You can't bring this team up to where it needs to be. You can't change this team's nature, the mentality that they have. And I'm not saying that there are managers out there who can. It's going to be very difficult. It truly is, because it's not easy to change the mentality of this football club. This is a problem that we've had for 17 years, 18 years, since we moved into the Emirates. It seems like the Emirates has drained the life and the soul of Arsenal Football Club, because when we made those outgoings of Henry, Bergkamp, Vieira, Perez, and the likes, when we had to let them go because we were in financial burdens, that's when it seemed like the whole club flipped on its head and everything seemed to have gone wrong from that point onwards. Is Highbury and the move to Emirates the thing to blame for the demise of Arsenal Football Club? Because we don't seem to be going anywhere. We seem to be static or moving backwards year upon year. But also, does this management or does this board have the know when to call it quits and when to really sit there and say, this is the right time to let him go? But do they also, on the flip side, have the know-how on who to bring in? Because I feel like they're going to make the wrong appointment. But does that mean we stick with Arteta because they're going to make that and the risk of them making the wrong decision? That's really down to how you perceive how badly we're playing or how badly things are. For me, it's been terrible. It's been so hard to really back Arteta at the moment. And it seems to be a very difficult task because there isn't anything I can really sit there and say that makes me positive about the direction he's trying to move us in. I've not truly seen a stable style of play. It seems to change month on month, week on week, match by match. And we don't really, I know he wants to implement this 4-2-3-1 and that's the style he's going for. But even that, it's like week on week, it seems to be different. It seems to be very conservative and very defensive one week. And then we go all out attack another. And this is the problem. It's like when he came in, it was really exciting. The way we were playing, the way we were pressing teams off the pitch, and the way we were counter-attacking and the attacking threat we did possess in that 3-4-3, sorry. But now it seems to be that he's even losing the attacking ability, but also the defensive stability of this team. But it seems like he's losing all of that. And it seems to be we're going backwards and backwards in everything that we're doing. But obviously, he does have a favourable, on paper, run after the international break. Do we as a fan base believe he deserves the opportunity to be able to turn this around? Or do you think he's had enough time to be able to turn this around? That is the real question that I do want to have a discussion with a lot of people about. And obviously Twitter has been a madness for it because people don't believe he should be given that time, because that's the time we should be getting a manager in that's going to guarantee results against Norwich, against Burnley, maybe a competitive nature against Spurs and Leicester and the likes? Or do we go with a maybe option of keeping Arteta and hoping he turns it around? But obviously, guys, this is coming up to the half an hour mark. And obviously, thank you everyone for tuning in. I will try and be a bit more regular and a bit more consistent with the content. I do apologize. Things do come up. Life comes up. But thank you very much for tuning in. Do leave a like, do share, do subscribe, and have a brilliant, brilliant day, people. Thank you very much for tuning in.